Hey,
What's going on?
how are you?
All right.
Good, good, good. It's good to see you. It's been a minute.
I know LA is pretty nice.
I can't believe we moved.
I mean, I'm bi-coastal, so perks of Facebook.
Hi,
Hey,
how are you guys?
Spirit. Good to see you.
You
See you.
too.
All right.
Oh, wait, there I go.
Yes. Okay. So I think we are all set on our end. I just want to make sure.
Can anyone hear us right now? Other people? Yeah, let's
Yes.
not disturb.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
you can.
All right. So I can't really see if we have attendees in here or not.
We do, and we're live.
Hi.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I see 22 people. Okay. All right, then let's get started. First of all, thank you to everyone that is attending this event. Welcome to Facebook's Leadership Panel Room. We are really excited to be bringing real, raw conversations with you today. The theme of this panel room is really for us to talk about the unwritten rules about getting into tech, right? So we oftentimes hear people talk about what it takes to get into tech, things we can control, right? Like the application, our resumes, but we don't talk about the things that we can't control. Like, what about the interview process? And what about the internal culture at companies? So today, we're going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into what those things that we can't control look like at Facebook. So I will start out by introducing myself, and then we'll have our three amazing panelists give an intro of themselves. But I'm Kiana Arnold, and I am a university diversity recruiter at Facebook. I support recruiting efforts for software engineering with new grads and also interns, and I have about 6 years of experience doing it. But I'm based in San Francisco at Facebook, and I am going to pass the mic over to the beautiful Genesis.
Thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Genesis. I am a software engineer at Facebook. I'm currently on the Civic Integrity team. What we do is, as the name kind of sounds, make sure that everything is kind of healthy and happy in the Facebook realm, especially during this time of the election. I've been at Facebook for a year now, actually just kind of hit a year. Super excited about that. I'm in the New York office, born and raised in New York. Currently residing in Brooklyn, even though I'm a Queens girl. And I think I'm done. So I'll let Rich introduce himself.
Hi, Rich Millhouse. I've been with Facebook for 4 years, going on 5 years now. Been here for a while. Originally from Miami Beach, moved to New York 7 years ago, and I'm recently relocated to LA during the pandemic. So Facebook joined as a leadership recruiter. Now I'm focusing on diversity leadership hiring for our engineering leaders for the company, like engineering managers that are building out consumer-facing products, working with people that are doing infrastructure as well as machine learning. And I also oversee our Black ERG Employment Resource Group in New York City as well. Jawan Sims.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So I'm Jawan Sims. I'm a privacy program manager. I actually just switched product areas, and I actually now cover civic integrity as same as Genesis. So I'm pretty sure I'll be seeing a lot more of you. So I am based out of the Menlo Park office, which is in San Francisco Bay Area. I am born and raised in Louisiana, so I'm a Southern guy. Actually, since COVID started, I've relocated to Louisiana for the time being. And a lot of you may not know what a privacy program manager is. We basically look at Facebook products to ensure that we're thinking about and being cognizant of doing the right thing with user data, and that we're not using it in the wrong way. So, welcome.
Yes, I love the intros. And for everyone who's joined with us or is just joining, we're kicking off our panel discussion now. And we're going to do a little bit of talking. We're going to get into the details of lots of different topics. mainly around interview process, recruiting process, and also internal culture. But we're going to leave 15 minutes for questions at the end. So I see some of you engaging in the chat. That's amazing. Ask as many questions as you want in the chat, but we're also going to open it up for some live Q&A at the end. So let's kick things off. I'd love to get started with Rich because you have some pretty good intel that I think a lot of people want to know. When it comes to Facebook being one of the leaders in tech, a company of our size, what are some things that stand out, or how are some ways that candidates can stand out when it comes to getting into the process and getting their foot in the door?
That's a great question, and there's several ways you can do that, right? I mean, typically, if you have a foot through the door, because good people know good people, so if you can get a referral of someone that you know, that's the best way to get it through the door out of Facebook, Google, because that goes a long way. Now, if you're not fortunate enough to know anyone and you're relying off your resume and applying to the post, I recommend making sure that on your resume, you're providing an example of accomplishments versus your responsibility related to that particular job description, because recruiters spend a total of 6 seconds when they're reviewing your resume. I can tell you that for a fact. And we want to make sure, like, we're going to overlook all the fluff. We want to make sure, like, you have your resume in chronological order. If there's any gaps in your resume, think about Facebook, right? Company, if you're applying for a full-time job, you want to see that you have some type of stability in your profile. So make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. And if there's any gaps for whatever reason, try to make sure you're filling it up with some context, right? So let's say you were on a sabbatical, or you were on maternity leave and you were gone for 6 months up to a year. Like, let the recruiter know that, so that way you have a better chance of them reaching out to you. But overall, the goal is to network. That's why events like this are so important. So like I said before, good people know good people. So if you happen to meet someone, that's the best way to make a good impression, to let them know more about you, because this speaks more to your resume. Thank you for that question, though.
Totally. And I always think it's very interesting to hear everyone's story about how they got into Facebook. I know for me, I did go through the referral route. And as a recruiter, I know 20% of referrals that go through a process usually get hired. And when you start at the top of that process as a referral, there's a 50-50 chance that you'll even get an interview. So as Rich said, referral processes are great, but I'm curious to know, Genesis and Juwan, like, what was your journey to Facebook? What did that look like for you? How did you get your foot in the door?
Juwan, do you want to go first, or should I?
No, take it away.
So for me, what was interesting is my last job, I was teaching at a tech boot camp. I actually really liked it until I realized that teaching wasn't my ministry. I literally, anyone's in education, my hat's off to you. However, I think after working in tech for 3 years and teaching at a boot camp, I was teaching full stack web development. I definitely am a fan and a huge proponent of LinkedIn. So I had my LinkedIn updated all the time. I made sure I had, the buzzwords, all that good stuff in my LinkedIn. And I was getting, I was reached out to by a few recruiters, but at the time that I was reached out to by my Facebook recruiter, I was not looking for a new position. So I guess I wasn't really looking at LinkedIn. But when I was ready to go, I looked at my email and looked at my LinkedIn inbox, and I realized that I had missed 3 messages from a Facebook recruiter. I felt like a clown. But either way, the last email said something like final reach out to Genesis for Facebook engineering. And I went through that process, and it was pretty smooth. I will say, because of the fact that I was nervous, and this is something, if anyone's going to take a technical interview, I'm sure like the pressure that you kind of put on yourself about going into those environments. But I kept pushing my interview back. And then I was supposed to interview in DC because that's where I was living at the time. And by the time I was ready to interview, they said that they didn't have any more spaces for DC engineering. So that got pushed back until the January, maybe it was like 3 months where I could interview. And then when I finally got hired in May, I couldn't start until the end of September. So even though, what I will say is, like, if a recruiter reaches out to you, one, check your LinkedIn inbox, and also just always be ready for interviews to an extent. Like, if you feel like you're approaching the time to switch up jobs, start studying now.
Wow. So crazy enough, my experience was actually the same, or very similar, I should say. So prior to Facebook, I worked at Uber, and I literally had just got promoted at Uber, which was my first promotion in my career. So I was like, I'm excited at this point. Y'all
right.
Can't do nothing. It's over with. Everybody's over. So I'm excited. And Facebook, literally 3 different recruiters from Facebook reached out to me. I wasn't looking for a role, but I was like, I'm gonna entertain them anyway, but I'm not leaving Uber like dead. Sorry, goodbye. So as I started engaging in conversation. And then the first 2, it was like the role just it wasn't a match, but it wasn't a personality match. I was just like, I can't do it. Like, I'm not willing to. Like, no, don't worry about it. So then a privacy recruiter hit me up on LinkedIn, and she was like, let's set up an interview. Like, let's go through the process. So I started it and literally made it up until my final interview. And she was like, yeah, can we want to interview you next week? And I was like, can't do it. Goodbye. Going to Dubai. Over with. So like, I was like, oh well, maybe it's just not meant to happen. But then as I started talking to her, she was like, we literally have several roles, and like, I promise I'm gonna save your interview spot until you get back. Came on site, did the interview, and it was really amazing. Like, just everyone's energy, everyone being honest and authentic. Like, this was probably one of the first interviews where I was able to walk in and truly just be myself. Like, it was crazy because I didn't I didn't have to fake the funk to get in. I was just like, look, this is what I know, this is what I want to do, and like, how can I help y'all? How can y'all help me?
I love it. Okay, so we all had some pretty unique stories. Mine was through referral process. I know Genesis, Juwan, LinkedIn is one way that you were reached out to. Rich, tell us, what are some other creative ways that we proactively seek out candidates who are historically underrepresented? And a 2-part question. Do you feel as though diversity and inclusion is a core part of the work that we do within our recruiting and sourcing teams?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Diversity and inclusion is important just because you need to have a diverse perspective when building products that serve the communities that we're in, right? So like, I really believe like having a diverse team allows for better ideas and perspectives. The company I was at before, Facebook, I was the only Black person at the whole organization. There's 300 people, and I represented New York. So like, going to Facebook in 2016 was like a breath of fresh air. And trying to go back to Jawan, like when I was interviewing, I remember seeing Black Lives Matters posters everywhere at the company. And I'm like, yo, I can't even talk about this in my last company. And I remember when I was in an interview, I saw some dude walking around with a do-rag. I'm like, yo, what are you doing? And I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like, what is to me, it just threw me off. And I was like, yo, this is different. But I'm glad to see that. And just going back to what I was saying before. So like, I feel like, with Facebook, they really were talking about, honestly, I was a little hesitant at first just because I was one of the probably 4 Black people in the company in New York at that time. But fast forward to today, there's a ton of us now, right? We have people like Genesis, who I recently met, and she's been able to do events with us, like seeing that growth. And it's allowing for diverse ideas and perspectives. It's been proven that underrepresented groups will also be more productive when it turns to like helping with retention, and it usually leads to more profits for the companies, more profitable. But in terms of like how we go about recruiting or finding diverse talent, I think one thing in particular is, of course, companies like Nextplay, right? Working with diverse organizations, attending conferences like Afrotech, Grace Hopper. Like I mentioned before, this is a great opportunity to kind of meet people face to face and an opportunity to make a great impression. And one thing that I did was I became a lead for the Black ERG for New York. And that allowed me to do events that were external facing, that was for the Black community within New York City. And that allowed us to tap into other people and kind of have them meet people from Facebook. So we did events where we demystified the process of like, what is like working at Facebook. We had people from like engineering, marketing, and sales. And we're talking to people that came from different backgrounds from the financial services industry and trying to demystify the process on seeing what skills are transferable and maybe pairing them with a person that's in the same space, but kind of have them do like a mentorship program. We'll give them like 3 months where they can prepare for interviews. So we've done a lot of external partnerships, and that's been really helpful. And of course, like Nesby, Dev Color, this Black Tech Meetup, and that's been proven to work for us in the past. So yeah. Sorry, I was like long-winded. I'm getting excited.
That was good. Give us all of the goodies, all of the information. Yes. Okay, one thing that you were talking about really stood out to me. How you said before you came to Facebook, you were the only Black person on your team or at the company. What was it?
Well, on my team.
Okay.
Well, the last company, only person in the company. Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. I can definitely relate to that. I think as, underrepresented minorities, like in those words themselves, that means there are less of us than other people. I want to know, and this can come from any of you, how do you go about balancing who you are in tech, specifically Facebook, and being underrepresented? Is that something that's a challenge for you? How does that work when it comes to like the internal culture of Facebook? Do you feel like it is a balancing act, or that you can find those spaces of community within Facebook? Talk to me.
So I'll say for me, at Facebook, it was different for me because my team is probably one of the most diverse teams at Facebook that I've seen. Like we have several different minority groups. We have men and women. Like it is literally like super, super diverse. And I felt a sense of like, I knew that I didn't have, I guess, like, what is it called? The syndrome where we feel like we don't belong.
Imposter syndrome.
We have imposter syndrome. It was just like, okay, like I'm here, like I'm part of the clique, I guess. Like I made it. But I will say I have had hard challenges with that early in my career. When I worked at other companies such as like Lockheed Martin coming out of college, although there were other minorities on the team, I think just to be honest, all minorities don't act as though they're a minority. Like you might see me in a room and I might see another, let's say, minority in the room, and I'm being like my true authentic self. And then that person is like not, they're like code switching, but code switching it to the point where it's like, it almost makes me look bad because I'm being authentic. And I think that really makes it hard because when you don't do such things, it's like you're kind of doing a disservice to your team, to your company, and to your products, because like that the person that you are matters. Because especially on a platform like Facebook, we all utilize Facebook. So if you only had one perspective or one mindset on the team, then it would not be possible to serve as many people as we do, because we would then we wouldn't understand, or we wouldn't, I guess, communicate with them in ways that we should.
I agree. If I can, want to chime in on that.
So
for me, I kind of have given code switching to God a long time ago. I don't really believe in it for a multitude of reasons. For one, first and foremost, especially not to make things political, but if you guys, if people have been watching the debates, all we can say is that professionalism is a sham. And to me, it's incredibly anti-Black, because what people say and what they associate with professionalism is things that are basically not a part of our culture. Like is that our hair is not professional. The way we speak is not professional. The way we dress, you know what I'm saying? Things like that. So when I first started working at Facebook, I was doing another recruiting event, like as soon as I started, because to me, it's really interesting also. We're assessed on various axes, and one of the axes is people. And one of my actually the two managers I've had so far are like, wow, Genesis, you excel so much in people. I'm like, bro, I'm just being a Black person and recruiting fellow Black people. You feel me? Like I'm doing what I feel like is necessary. So, if it works for me, it works for me. But regardless, I went to this diversity recruiting event when I first started, and I was wearing big hoop earrings, because I love hoop earrings. And I had my braids, like these long blonde braids. And again, I thought it was cute. But for some reason, people feel like that's like an act of defiance to an extent. And I'm kind of like, it's so interesting, the fact that we kind of feel like we need to not be ourselves, and we need to not, be authentic. And I think it's unfortunate. And I absolutely refuse to ascribe to that, because of the fact that we have so many other things to worry about, especially being a Black woman in engineering. On my first team, I was the only Black person. I was the only woman engineer. And also, at the time that I was on this team, I was the only Black woman engineer at Instagram in the world, which I felt personally was absurd. But I switched teams now on the Facebook side, and now there's more Black women engineers at Instagram. Regardless, I felt very, very, very much like who I was. And again, like I said, I'm not someone I'm actually very bad at being fake. So I'm not someone who's gonna, try to fake it and to be friends with people and stuff like that. But what I saw was people speaking other languages at the same little pod desks as me. Or I'm in this rotational program, for example, or I was in this rotational program, just graduated out. But in that program, you know, some engineers didn't know about it, so they would sit and talk to me about basically it's the diversity program. To an extent, it does give diversity vibes. Regardless, they would only talk to me about the aspects of that program, and then like just get up and walk away. Just kind of times where I would notice, especially for back-end teams, like infrastructure teams, if you guys are engineers, you'll kind of get a vibe for different types of personalities on different teams. Regardless, I felt like that team wasn't a good fit for me because of the fact that I feel like they didn't understand the fact that all types of people should be in these spaces, and they kind of just weren't used to a person who was like me. So that's also why, I mean, I switched teams to a place where I feel incredibly welcomed. And also you can't be on a team like Civic Integrity without good people, in my opinion. But now that I'm on this team where I feel like I can truly authentically be myself, I see like my white engineering manager, he had the Black Lives Matter fist when everything with George Floyd was going on. Not to say that like that's, you know, Ally of the Year award worthy, but I do feel very welcome to be able to be in a team where I feel like people are actually hearing me and they actually understand me, and also give me the space to be angry, be upset, be vocal, and be myself, and not feel like I need to tone that down before someone thinks I'm like angry Black woman or something like that. So I think at a place with 40,000 employees, you're going to be able to find a community for yourself. And it's important that you're authentic with yourself so that you find the right community.
I love all of that. I can relate to so much what you're saying. And honestly, like, we think about Facebook being a social media giant, right? And in the times, in a lot of controversial topics, issues, we talk about the debates, elections. We think about the murder of George Floyd, the recent results and verdict of Breonna Taylor's trial. How do you all, or do you feel like you have the ability to come to Facebook and let your own voice be heard on stances like that? How does that affect you as an internal employee? And does it impact your work and performance?
Well, I can tell you this, right? Like when I joined 2016, we had the death of like Eric Gardner. You know, there was a lot of those started happening. I remember protesting, and mind you, I was at a company where I was the only Black person. So I had to take this stuff at work and deal with it on my own and not have to like kind of like hide all the energy and all the anger that I had inside. So coming to Facebook, we have like, if you guys know, like Facebook, we use Facebook at work. So we have our own platform. We have groups that are just for the Black community, and we open it up to our allies, and we can kind of talk about these discussions. And that was like a breath of fresh air for me because, like, you know, the election just happened and Trump became president, and that really hurt me as well. So it's like I was able to kind of voice my, you know, concerns and find like-minded people to talk about things that affected our community, and people were open and honest about that. And one thing that I also worked on is because, you know, I had the imposter syndrome, like, so I didn't start at Uber, Joanne. So I came in here fresh out of an agency background, and I'm just like, it's my first time working for a big tech company, and I didn't feel like I belonged even on my team. So one thing that I did, I figured out, you know, what I needed to do to get better. I started working with some of the our program managers or diversity program managers, and we created this program called Family Circles, where we have it for Black and Latin. I was one of the people for New York, and I was a leader. So essentially what that was, this was like a mentorship program for new employees to Facebook, Black employees, and people that transfer from different offices, where I would lead a group of 5 people across different pillars, whether they're in marketing and sales, but they're just new to Facebook. And I would like talk to them about how to navigate, how to get acclimated to Facebook, how to, you know, what is like being Black in Facebook, what tools are available for you, and kind of how to talk about things that are like, things that you wouldn't even know, like how do you navigate conversations with your manager, how to deal with conflict resolution on people on your team. If you're dealing with harassment, who can you go to? And I'm like that point of contact for that. And especially if people are like, yo, I want to come in, I want to help impact the community. I'm like, well, are you actually working on, do you know your core job function? Because you have to be successful in your role first. So having that person that's there to kind of help you. So like, Facebook's been great in that regard, but the thing is, like, that came about because of how I was feeling. And the fact is, like, if you have, the company gives you autonomy to kind of do what you want, and you'd be surprised if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So like, this is the kind of company where you can kind of push on things that you never thought was possible. But yeah.
When I first started at Facebook, I actually joined a family circle like 1 month into my role, and I promise that was the best thing I could have did. It was like so refreshing because although I have other colleagues, like people of color, on my team, it was like just to talk to people outside was amazing. Um, but I guess to your question, I mean, so for me, whenever like dealing with Breonna Taylor and like just honestly just being black in America in general this year, or being a minority this year, period, it's been heavy. You know, like feeling it's literally been a roller coaster on top of a pandemic. And I think this was the first time ever in my role where I spoke to my leadership. I'm talking director level in front of everybody this this is not, it's not right. We know this. And like, am I 100%? No, I'm not. And do I have the capacity to come to work and show up for you? No, I do not. Because I'm in a season where I have to show up for myself. And that's hard for me. Because, in explaining to them, like, I relocated to California. I'm in California by myself. All my family is in Louisiana. There's no way you can expect me to come to work in an environment where I have to smile every day, but yet I go home and I see that someone that looks like me was just murdered. Like, it's no way possible that I'm going to come here and be 100% okay. So when you approach me in my role, I want you to think about that. Like, just think about the things that we have to deal with outside of coming to work, because it's almost like we live two lives even when we don't want to. Like, yes, I come to work and you appreciate me while I'm here, but you don't care about what happens to me after 5. You just want me to be back at work the next day. So like breaking that cycle of like it's more than just 9 to 5, and just also explaining to my team like, why is it that every time people of color need a job or we want a good job, we have to move to California? Like, why cannot you meet us in the communities where we have support, where we have people that we can lean on, so we don't feel like we're isolated or on an island, or that we have to leave our family to better our futures? Like, that's unfair. And a lot of other ethnic groups don't have to do that. But I said all that to say, the way that I've handled it is really like putting myself first and taking time as needed and not asking, but telling, like, I know that whenever if I have deliverables, they're gonna get done. I know that my job is gonna be done, but I also know that mentally I have to be here 100% in order for me to perform at 110%. Like, and I have to get those recharges. And after just explaining and being vocal about that to my team, like they've been very supportive, because I mean, it's not that they don't care. It's like, honestly, I mean, to be honest, they're ignorant to a lot of the things that we really deal with. So until we start to talk about those things, they really won't understand.
Well,
I almost got emotional, so I had to stop.
I felt I felt that. But honestly, I think what each of you has said was in some way, shape, or form, you've had an ability to use your voice, whether that is directly on your team or for a larger impact for our Black Ag community at Facebook. So kudos to you. Self-care and taking care of yourself, like you said, Juwan. So I just want to say hats off to you and thank you for your vulnerability and openness.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question, kind of rock the table a little bit, right? So I know with Facebook having so many controversial stances and being in like the limelight of the press, and oftentimes, and sometimes it comes negatively towards us. Has there ever been a moment, you don't have to go through the details, but has there been a moment where you disagreed with our stance, and what keeps you at Facebook?
Can I chime in on this one?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
As I mentioned, I'm on the civic integrity team, and I want to tell people who do not know what that means. So my team is actually responsible for making sure that people, especially when it comes to voter and census interference, things of that nature, that people are safe and informed on these applications. And by that I mean the entire family of apps. For example, my most recent project has been bringing a tool for you to report specifically voter and census interference on Instagram to, like, I mean, we have a special program where it's like a, whatever, basically I'm bringing it to Instagram because it's on Facebook already. So I just launched that, actually, super proud of me and my team, so very happy. But regardless, my team is a team who would be responsible for if you guys remember this disgusting post from number 45 saying, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, correct? And I'm a big tweeter. Not sure if you guys like social media as much as I do. But I love Twitter, and Twitter actually took the correct approach of flagging that tweet and saying that it violates Twitter's policy for violence because it's a bit egregious, right? And Facebook decided to do nothing about that. And by that, I felt incredibly conflicted because lots of my friends were kind of like, what the hell is going on? And I felt honestly personally targeted because I'm on that team that would be flagging that content and doing some sort of informed treatment, as we call it. So how we treat information that can be harmful to the community. And we were not able to act. So I've definitely been in a position where I've felt personally conflicted about Facebook's decision to handle certain things in a certain way. And what I can give you ample reasons why a girl still works at this company. First of all, I have the best insurance I've ever had in my life. I have better insurance than my mom. You know what I mean? And then also, like, as an engineer, they pay well. And then also, to me, what bothers me the most, because I also had a very bad disagreement with someone. I honestly have lost friends since I started working at Facebook because I think that there's a very interesting cognitive dissonance that a lot of people have when they become, woke to a certain extent, and then they take on this abolitionist mindset. And I get it. I understand. I'm down to, what do they call it? Eat the rich, all that good stuff. However, how are you going to tell someone to better themselves and be a computer science major and do all these things to be top in their tech career and all this stuff? And then when they reach the pinnacle of their career, or not the pinnacle, but they reach a good threshold, what people would consider to be a particular pinnacle of their career, then bash them because of the fact that that company has done some sort of not super nice things. And also, not saying, people might be watching this and be like, yeah, she's drinking the Kool-Aid. To an extent, yes. Two, I love social media, so I think that all social media companies are doing this. Facebook, however, is to me, the pioneer of a social media company to this many people, right? And also, Facebook now owns Instagram. Facebook owns WhatsApp. Facebook owns so many things. So when Facebook has done these bad things, it's kind of the pioneer where they're kind of the people who get the brunt of the negative effects because of the fact that they're the first people to do it. I do not agree with everything that my employer does. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I thought that was very, very poorly handled, amongst other things. However, what I will say is that Facebook does a lot of good. And what I do need people to understand is that it's been a really interesting conversation. My next project, for example, is going to be hiding comments on Facebook, right? And we have these discussions because it's kind of like, well, when you hide comments and people kind of feel like, well, what's authentic, right? Because if I'm a political officer and I'm hiding all of the negative receipts that I'm getting, well, then people are going to think that everyone thinks it's positive, right? So then where does this line between the company and then the bad actors lie on these platforms? And it's really, really hard to always, or to like not lose. I'll put it that way. It's very, very hard to not lose. I'm not going to, again, I do think we kind of err on the side of losing sometimes. I'm not here trying to be a cape for the company. But what I will say is that it's very hard to balance just everything that everyone wants. And I think one thing that keeps me here is knowing that I'm on a team that's here for good. And by good, I mean not like for the long term, like for good purpose in the world. And it makes me feel like my money isn't blood money, or, like I'm not here acting like a cog in a huge nasty machine or something like that. Some people I don't think necessarily care too much. And that's, to me, I've seen people do lots of worse things for less money, or, you know what I mean? Like, in the grand scheme of things, I think the ethical Olympics is really hard to figure out how you're going to act or play. But for me and my home, I'm going to stay working at Facebook if I'm going to be in software engineering for as long as I can.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add on to what you were saying, I remember my first day at Facebook in orientation, I heard a speaker say, like, we are not perfect. We get it wrong a lot of the times. We're not always going to get it right. And I thought that was so interesting. But it really set the tone for my career path at Facebook, because I've noticed our company is very transparent about everything going on. And every Thursday, Mark hosts a Q&A, and those comments light up. I don't know if you all see it, but like they don't hold back when it comes to telling their stance on what we have done publicly. So one thing I will say about Facebook, I agree. I don't always agree with our stances, but we have a voice and we have the ability to shift things internally. We have the ability to kind of create new processes and let our voices be heard, and contribute to that impact that is reaching billions of people. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right, let me step on down off the soapbox for a second.
It gets really hard, honestly, to not get soapboxy because it's a really dangerous territory. Because you don't, and then especially in the Black community too, you don't want to be very. It's hard to like not seem elitist, or it's hard to not be like the better Black or talented tenthy or what do people call sellouty or anything like. It's hard, but at this point, I'm no longer internalizing something people have to say to me because I'm here to better my career. I'm not saying that I want to work and be buddy and eat at this man's home. I mean, disrespect to him, but I nobody who makes to me like even over 500 mil is a saint, to keep it honest. So I think that there's a lot of ways that we can like disassociate yourself with certain things, and maybe that's my fault, but
yeah, that's oh Lord. I don't even want to get to the post from that man. But that was a conversation that I've actually had directly with my team. And they were just going through like, it was actually a real heavy conversation. And they were just saying like, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people don't agree with the stance that Facebook took, which is true. Facebook also took a while to actually make any type of comment or I guess recognition towards like Black Lives Matter in general. So it was just for me, it was very uncomfortable. And honestly, I was really at a point in my career where it was like, because I started Facebook in January. So at this point, I was like, did I make the right decision? Like, what am I doing? Am I becoming one of them? Like, because if that's the case, I don't want to do that. But then I thought about something that someone told me when I was in college, and it sticks with me every day. It's like, you have to be the change that you want to see, because what good does it do if I utilize Facebook, Instagram, all these social media apps every day, but yet I try to say I would never work there? But I'm on your platform every day. So if anything, if I want to make a difference, me tweeting about you ain't going to do nothing. Now, if I come in your system and I call these things out, no shade to the tweet, because I don't do two to two. But like, if I come to your company and I'm vocalizing the problems that you don't see, then absolutely we're going to make change. I literally got in a disagreement with someone on my team when we were having a discussion because they felt as though Mark, it's not how he felt, but he took a very political approach. Like, I don't want to step on any toes. I can upset a lot of people, but do you really want to upset that guy? But guess what? It doesn't matter. Because just because something is not a threat to you individually, that does not mean the next person on the side of you does not feel threatened. And that's where I had a problem. Because when you put something on our platform, it doesn't matter if 10 million people say, oh, this is nothing. If I feel as though this is a threat to me, that's what matters. And I would never let you suppress that feeling, regardless of if you made a political choice or not. I don't support the choice you made. However, I will be vocal about the choice that you made, and I will let you know that it was wrong. And when you have Black people or people of color in general that work within your company, and you're basically saying like, this is a decision that we found out to be the best, you're wrong. But again, as I say, it takes time. Like, it's no company at all is going to wake up in the morning and be like, you know what, we're getting it right. We're always going to get it wrong. Even when we get it right, we're going to bounce back, get it wrong again. But like, it's a learning experience. And just to be a part of that and to know that you're making an impact is great. Like, that's the feeling that when I go home at night, I'm like, okay, I'm doing something good.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So we've got time for about one more of our discussions here. And I really want to touch on imposter syndrome and being the only one sometimes. I think back to when I started at Facebook and I was like, imposter syndrome? What? No, I'm not going to have that. I've been doing this for so long. And then one day it just kind of like, boop, hit me. And I was really in my head, even if it wasn't like other people having these thoughts about me, it was still like, well, I am the only woman on this team, or I am the only Black person collaborating on this project, or maybe so-and-so has been here longer than me. What would you say to our viewers who experience imposter syndrome in the application process, interviewing, and then when they start new roles?
So I'll just give a brief explanation or a brief thing on this. I think imposter syndrome, what's interesting to me is that no one to me goes out of it. And I think what we need to do is be gracious with ourselves and be nice to ourselves. And something that I've learned, especially just as a growing adult, as a person who's a professional, I actually today I had a very negative thought, and I was like, I said the words out loud, like, stop being mean to yourself, Genesis. Yeah. Because you can't, at a certain point, regardless of imposter syndrome, like, at what cost? You know what I mean? At what cost? But regardless of that, something that I found was really interesting, when I first joined Facebook, I had this meeting, and this man who was in the same like program that I was in, who was graduated out, was super successful at Facebook, he said that he had imposter syndrome too, and something that helped him was giving faith to your recruiters, right? Like, if you want to disrespect yourself, go ahead and do that. But Rich, Juwan, Kiana, you know what I'm saying? Y'all know what you're doing, right? And I wouldn't be at my job if my recruiter didn't know what they were doing. So to me, it kind of gives me a little bit of, I guess, sitting back on that fact that I was not only sought after, but then I was hired in this role, kind of gives me that safe, that check, like, okay, I'm here. So and also actually the stats for a bad hire in a company like this is like $200K of bad money. It's very expensive for a bad hire who's not going to actually give back the money that you've invested in that person. So give yourself the credit of understanding that your recruiters probably did their job correctly, and don't have that I don't belong here. But beyond that, if you really do feel like you can't just grasp the fact that you do belong in a place, just reach out to people. And I would say, again, to me, my most beneficial, the trait that's been most beneficial to me in terms of my success is my authenticity, because I'll definitely reach out to people and be like, hey, I'm not doing well right now, or hey, like, I need help. Hey, I need to talk to someone. And you find people, and I'm sure that as you get older, you kind of feel the vibes from people if you can trust them with your honesty. So definitely don't go running to some people who are going to take your vulnerability as weakness, but definitely seek out people who will take that vulnerability as strength and be able to coach you through those moments of imposter syndrome. That's what I do.
I would say for me, one thing I do is, and I've been doing this a lot lately, it's like really you have to be patient with yourself. Like, do not think that everybody's not gonna walk into a company and be a rock star. Everybody's not gonna walk into every interview and land a job. That's just the reality of it. And sometimes you are enough, but there's other factors. I mean, let's be honest, we're all minorities, we're people of color. There's other things that's going on that we probably don't even see. Regardless if we want to believe it or not, it's true. I mean, it's real. Like, you can go to a role interview and knock it out of the ballpark. That does not necessarily mean you're going to get a job, because there's other things. There's other things that people have in the back of their minds. It sucks, but it's real. And I feel like you don't have to carry that weight or you're not enough because someone else didn't see it in you. Like, that's not your fault. That's theirs. That's their loss. And I truly, truly believe that, like, the places that you really do end up, whatever role, whatever company, if you're an entrepreneur, no matter where you are, someone in that season is waiting on you to show up in the best way that you know how. And sometimes that's not always perfect. Like, if you mess up, who cares? Learn from it, go get up again. Like, and it's another thing that people always say, like, it doesn't matter how you fall down, but it's like, are you going to get back up? And like, what are you going to do? And like, you really, and I literally do this to this day. Like, I have to wake up in the morning and inspire myself to, like, okay, let's conquer this day. Like, me switching to a whole new product area, such as civic integrity. I was, prior to civic integrity, I was doing business integrity, which is completely different. But literally transitioned into the role, and it was like, okay, do the job. And it's like, you just have to go. I don't feel bad about it at all. Yes, it is scary. I mean, we're humans. But like, understand that you're not perfect. We're not robots. You're gonna have these feelings. Feel all the feelings. Make all the mistakes. It's okay. We're human. But again, it's how you bounce back. Be patient with yourself. You have time.
Yeah, I really appreciate what both of you have added. I know for anybody out there who's come across imposter syndrome or might be having some type of like hesitancy to apply to a role, I am living proof that a rejection does not necessarily mean that you are not enough. I tell my candidates this story all the time because unfortunately as a recruiter, sometimes we have to tell people we are going to have to pass this go around. But I interviewed with Facebook 4 times and I did not get hired with Facebook until the 4th time. And I felt so nervous because during one of my interviews, I had like an interviewer who had rejected me in the past show up in my final interview. And I'm like, oh no, I'm sure they hated me. That's why I didn't make it through the last time. I'm not going to make it this time. And, spoiler, I got hired and I actually work with the person who rejected me the first time. And I remember on my first day, I saw that person and I walked up to them and I just said, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. And that person looked at me and said, I wish I had space on my team. Like you were phenomenal, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, what? So they did like me. So I agree with Juwan. If you ever get a rejection, please don't take it personal. You never know what type of variables are happening behind the scenes. And for those of you that go into roles at companies, or you might be transitioning internally, starting a new role, but you still get that imposter syndrome because it's something new. Recognize that starting something new requires a learning curve. And most of the times when we have doubt in ourselves, it's because we need more information. So don't be afraid to ask questions. All right. So this conversation has been great. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say something. The last thing I want to add is that the ability to tell the questions that I think something that imposter syndrome really adds to is whenever you feel like everything you ask is a stupid question, lots of times recognize the fact that you should not know some things. When you first start at a job, you're not meant to know everything. Ask questions because the last thing you want to do is be stuck on something that you could have resolved in 2 minutes if you were to ask someone who was a subject matter expert. And that's something that I've really had to lean into as I'm like getting out of this really toxic imposter syndrome for myself. But great point on that question.
Yes. Okay, so this conversation, I've truly enjoyed it. Thank y'all so much for getting raw, giving us the real. I want to open it up for everyone in the chat, our 48 attendees right now. If you have questions for any of our panelists, like individually, go ahead, you can add them, you can add your questions. We'd love to get some of those answered before the end of the hour.
I think there were a few.
Let me scroll up.
Someone had a question for people saying, what kind of voice does the person in the bottom have? I think it might be you guys in a position. I think you guys might be in a position in Facebook where your voices are heard and respected. But what about a junior engineer or a mid-level engineer?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I guess I'll respond. What I'll say is, child, I just started. So your girl is not super high up in the company. But what I will say is, as the teams are very, very, very small, you'd be shocked about how small the teams are, but how meaningful and impactful, to me at least, how major and how effective each engineering team is. So for me, I've actually had a good amount of impact as soon as I started, because if I'm an engineer and I want to decide how I'm going to build something and how I'm going to build a particular tool, that something needs to get done. There's a product manager, there's a designer, there's a whatever, but I'm going to be the person who suggests to the designer, hey, what about this? Or what about something like this? And it's a very collaborative effort. I haven't heard, honestly, anyone's voice silenced. I think also because of the fact that Facebook is so new age and so like, we're PC, we're cute, we're not racist. You know what I mean? Everyone loves to make sure that everyone's voice is at least heard. So I don't think that there's any sort of ranking as far as what type of engineer has a voice. Maybe there's a final say, but also you can have one-on-ones with that person to sort of prove your point, to me, from my experience.
Awesome. I see a question from Akila Murray. Do you feel like a strong social presence helps you during the interview process? Will teams be looking at your profile, or is knowing the platform enough, especially if you're interested in Instagram product marketing and shopping? Because she mentioned some of your employees have really big presence online. Honestly, I think having a large presence does help. So like, it helps in the sense that for engineers, right? For me, for instance, if I'm looking to try to find the best talent, one thing that I do look for are engineering leaders that are on the speaker circuit, right? People that are doing panel discussions, that are judging competitions, that have patents. Like those are things that kind of set you apart from other candidates. So like, yeah, it's not a make or break, but it does help your chances. The more, and especially if your social presence is real, like you didn't buy your followers on Instagram, like it's all organic, especially if you're going into a marketing role, because we do want to find people that are subject matter experts, right? Because what are you bringing to the table? We don't want the same thought for everyone. We want people to have a different perspective. So like, if you have like your own social presence, if you're like an influencer in your own right, that's great. And even if you're not, you can become one and still tell the recruiter that you're doing that, because we want people that have things that are outside of work. You know, Facebook gives you the tools to kind of be an entrepreneur. There's people that have their own businesses that work at Facebook. I mean, if you think about Nextplay, the founder, from my understanding, was working at LinkedIn and did this on the side of his desk, and now he's doing this full time. And we love people that, especially for me, I love talking to candidates that have their own startups that are interested in coming to Facebook, because it's a whole different ballgame. So it helps, but it doesn't hurt. So I hope I answered your question. There's another question. I'm going to read it off. What advice do you have for someone that has gotten through the interview process but is having a difficulty getting placed?
That's definitely a situational basis, because at least if you're talking about engineering, we go through boot camp as soon as you get hired. So for 2 months, you go through this tech boot camp to an extent. It's like self-paced learning, getting acclimated to the Facebook environment. You can like take tasks from specific teams, and you sit with teams to sort of see where you want to go. And then based on, your alignment with the team, you get placed there. But I'm not sure for you guys, how did you interview for a particular role? How does that work? By particular role, I mean a particular team.
Yeah, for me, I interviewed for a particular role on a particular team. It was many roles, but they all literally did the same thing. So I interviewed directly with team members, the managers, the director. Like everything was, like it was very much so just like specific. Which I do understand that engineering is very different, as you just said. So I think that experience really, I mean, it's subjective to, are you doing engineering route, or, are you doing other avenues at Facebook?
I'm looking at a question here. It's a good one, and someone actually said +1 to this question. So Elizabeth says, I'm in a boot camp about how boot camps are seen from a recruiting side. And then someone else said, boot camp or degree? And do you think having boot camp experience versus having a degree makes any difference when it comes to trying to get into Facebook?
Do one of the recruiters want to talk on this? Because I made it.
I think you should talk about it because you have that, right? So
I also want to hear you guys' perspective, but I'll just speak on my experience. So I went to Duke University and I majored in computer science, but I'm not going to hold you guys. My GPA was trash. I was not a good student. But your girl graduated. That being said, after I graduated, I was applying for different roles. I was definitely one of those people who didn't think they belonged in the software space. I didn't think I was nerdy enough or whatever. Got past that, but I ended up going to a boot camp because of lots of things. If you guys want to add me on LinkedIn, this is my name, Genesis Bonds. I can talk to you about it. The boot camp name was Revature. What I liked about this particular boot camp is that when you go there, it's free. They pay for your housing and they pay for, it's like 3 months. They pay for any certifications you get, but then they don't really make any money unless you get a job. Some boot camps, what I will say is you need to be aware of the fact that you're taking on a huge liability, because if you pay that $15K up front, you're not guaranteed a job at the end. I've actually had a student, like I said, I went to the boot camp and then I started teaching there because I did well and they hired me to be a teacher. So I had a student who went to, I think, GA, as not to like, trash them or whatever, but he went there and couldn't find a job. So then he went to our boot camp, and it just kind of highlighted the fault in the boot camp process to me. That being said, my experience was really solely Revature. I mean, I went to the camp and then I taught there, but my resume spoke for itself to an extent. And then when I got there to the interview, I was able to pass the interview. So from my understanding, I don't think that anyone has a pro or con, because I know so many software engineers who are at Facebook who do not have, computer science degrees. They just know how to code. And if you feel like, if you feel a way about your resume not really having a lot of computer science background or like tangible experience, what I would do is definitely go apply to a job where you kind of like, okay, I can prove to you that I know this and this material. And then when you apply for a Facebook job, now you have tangible experience, right? Where someone's not saying, okay, well, this person just went to a boot camp for 3 months, but now I know that they can code, and then you can pass that interview. And for anyone who's watching who wants to know how to pass a coding interview, I honestly need to get sponsored by these people at this point because I will scream it from the mountaintops. But interviewcake.com, really, I will swear by it. And they also have a Twitter, just at interviewcake, and they have free coding challenges or free coding, interview questions. And then they explain it so well. For me, one thing that also helped me was recording myself as I answered a question, because one thing you never want to do is like be quiet. So, I mean, I can talk about coding challenge interviews for forever, but just the interview matters so much.
That's a great point you made. And just from my experience, from what I've noticed, people with degrees typically do better on the interview process, right? Because like you never know what you're going to get with different boot camps, right? She talked about GA and saying that it wasn't the best experience, people weren't getting hired. And I can see that for myself. I noticed that there were a lot of candidates that had the GA bootcamp background that didn't do well in our interviews. So I think having a comp sci background gives you the fundamentals with like data structures and algorithms, helps kind of having that foundation helps you a little bit, right? Even for engineering leaders, I typically find engineering leaders that come from like a comp sci background even typically do better in your process just because of that knowledge that they had that's been embedded. So like it isn't a death sentence. Like Genesis mentioned, like there are a lot of great tools out there to like train, but you really have to take your time and work on it because it's not as easy to come to a Facebook coming from a boot camp. I mean, Genesis is like really bright. She's smart. I mean, that's a different ball game, right? But again, I think if you're in college right now and you're considering it, definitely I would advise you to go the comp sci way if you can. If not, then there's other ways around it. It's just going to be a little harder. That's all.
Okay, so we are reaching time. We've got about a minute left. And I just want to take a little bit of time to say a special thank you, Rich, Genesis, Juwan. You have been amazing. Truly, I know for me, I've really appreciated hearing each of your stories, your perspectives, your journey to Facebook and at Facebook internally. So for all of you watching, thank you so much for joining. If we could give like a little virtual applause, I wish we could do that. But thank you all so much for being here today. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
Thanks, everyone.
You guys enjoyed. And
all
good
right.